Hi there, it's Pete from Hermitage Road. Welcome back to the loft. Tonight I'm going to show you about one of my favourite locomotives, although they all seem to be favourites, the Class 20, very much an unsung hero of the BR fleet. Now they were introduced in 1957 as Type 1 locomotives. They're 1,000 horsepower and they're fitted with the reliable 8-cylinder English electric locomotive and the running gear for them as well, and built at Vulcan Foundry, most of them. Now they're generally considered one of the big success stories, but that's not entirely true, because at the start BR ordered more locomotives than they actually needed, and they were struggling to find work for them because the trip workings and short freights that they were built for were disappearing from BR. Then some bright spark decided to use them in multiple. So they coupled them nose to nose so that they had good visibility from the cabs. It turned them effectively into a 2,000 horsepower locomotive. They were only used generally for coal. There were other things carried oil occasionally, and they were also used quite extensively in Scotland as well as the Midlands. They were produced in 2 batches, one with the head code discs, which was the first one. The far one that you can see poking its nose out the shed, and next to it is with the centre head code. This was the later version. When they were produced, the first ones were in BR green without the yellow warning panels on them. This was a later thing they had to put in for safety of track workers. The one in the rather garish livery, it was a special done for rail tours. There were 2 like this. This one's called Wensleydale, and this is the latest Bachmann version. It's a sound-fitted one, and this has lights, which was the thing that let the previous version down a bit. It has lights and much better bogies and detail on it. Now in the station is a pair of Class 20s on a typical train, a rake of HAA hoppers. Unfortunately, I've only got 10 to put on there because this layout is not big enough to have a full-size train, obviously. But they're very much, it gives a representation of it, which I'm quite pleased at. Now, running the Bachmann 20s would involve having a consist, which I tried doing them so I could run them in multiple, but I found speed matching problems, and you were getting snatching on them as they were running, which is not too good. So in the end, I decided to remove the motor and the drive mechanism of one of them in each of the pairs that I run. I've got all the bits, I can put it all back at any time. It's not too difficult, but it does mean it's if the lead locomotive is effectively dragging the other one. Now on the second one of the 2, you can see a Scotty dog. This was the symbol for the Scottish allocated ones, based on that Motherwell, where they were used a lot for steel and for coal trains. Originally, they were all painted in green, as I said, but eventually they started to give them, they turned them to blue and then into the rail freight red stripe that they got here, which smartened the looks up no end. But behind that is a bit of an oddity, or the end of an oddity. That is one in BR green, heavily weathered, but with tops numbers. This was actually the very last BR locomotive that was left in service in green. Obviously there were others that were painted in sort of celebration type liveries like the Class 40 and things like that, but this was the last one, and it lasted quite late into the 80s. Now I'll start up this Class 20, which is the sound fitted one. This is the Bachmann sound. It's in the first of the 2 of them. I didn't want to fit it in a locomotive that's effectively being dragged, so it's only in the front one. It's a very slow, cold start on these. It takes quite a while before you can actually pull away. The 20s you can see here are pulling a train of HAAs. I've weathered them a bit, but I think there's bits too clean even now. As they pull out of the station, I'll follow them a little bit. Now the 20s were definitely a success story. They survived pretty well intact until almost the Class 60s came in to replace them. As I said, they ran in pairs, but occasionally I believe they ran them in multiples of 4, which is quite a sight. I never saw that myself. They weren't very common around the Bristol area, unfortunately. They only ever got down here on rail tours or over to Seven Tunnel Junction. They had regular services to there. They were never really a passenger locomotive, although I believe in Scotland sometimes they did step in the summer to run trains out to some of the remote Scottish areas, but as a passenger loco, not really like that. In later years, it started to prove a problem was the range on them. They only had small fuel tanks, so the DRS, who took over the nuclear trains and were using them on there, decided to have long-range tanks put on them, which were just behind the cab. This almost doubled their range and made them very useful. They were the 20-stroke 3s. Also, Hunslet Barclay, who were contractually doing weed killing on the railways, they had the 20-stroke 9s, and they were done the same way. A lot of people don't realise that the Class 20 actually had 2 driving positions. I can't really show you because I'd have to take a cab apart almost to do it, but they have 2 driving positions. One is at this end, the cab end, and there's also one behind it, facing the other way through the small windows when it was running nose first. I think they were the only locomotive I knew that did this, unless maybe the Class 15s. Who knows? Now, you've got to say about the 20s that they were fantastically reliable. The availability on them was very high for a locomotive at that time. Obviously nothing like the 66s now, but they were built in the 50s, so what do you expect? And they have been very popular with enthusiasts, and they still are. They still use them on rail tours, and a few companies still have them, like Harry Needle and places like that. Now, if you could like, subscribe, share and comment. I always welcome comments. And I don't know quite what I'll do in the video. I might do an update on the layout next, because I've been working on the awnings on the station, and I think they're pretty well finished now. So it's good night from me at Hermitage Road, and thank you for watching.